Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to completely deconstruct the mechanics of heart failure. I want you to think of the human heart like a highly sophisticated organic engine. Today, we're diving straight into the exact pathophysiology and diagnosis of what happens when this incredible engine is pushed to its absolute limits. How it desperately tries to adapt and how those very adaptations ultimately cause it to fail.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover defining heart failure, the global impact, ventricular remodeling, the vicious cycle, and finally, electrical dyssynchrony, moving right from the macro level all the way down to the micro.
First up, Section 1, defining heart failure, more than just stopping, because we really need to clarify what this terrifying phrase actually means.
So, the new universal definition of heart failure is actually super fascinating because it highlights that this is a complex, progressive syndrome. To actually meet this definition, a patient needs symptoms, things like breathlessness or fatigue, alongside a physical, structural, or functional abnormality of the heart. But here's the crucial part. This has to be backed up by objective evidence. We're talking about either fluid congestion in the lungs or body, or elevated natriuretic peptides. And if you're wondering what those are, they're essentially biological distress signals the heart releases into the blood when it's struggling. So it's not just a weak pump, right? It's a whole systemic syndrome of fluid overload and inadequate output.
Now, Section 2, the global impact, a massive public health engine. Once you grasp that strict definition, the sheer global scale of this disease becomes, well, truly staggering.
Look at this number. An estimated 56.2 million people are living with heart failure worldwide right this second. It's a massive public health issue. And as our populations age, and as contributing factors like obesity just keep rising globally, we're staring down an incredibly pervasive challenge to our healthcare systems. 56 million. To put that into perspective, that's practically the entire population of England.
And to really bring that massive global number home and make it personal, a 24% lifetime risk. That means literally 1 in 4 people have a lifetime risk of developing this condition. Whether it's you, a family member, or a friend, this makes understanding the mechanics of heart failure absolutely crucial for almost everyone watching this explainer.
But here's the thing, this disease doesn't hit all populations equally. In the US, community-based studies showed that the incidence of heart failure disproportionately impacts Black populations, followed by Hispanic, white, and Chinese Americans. And why is that? Well, these differences are largely driven by disparities in cardiometabolic risk factors, things like hypertension, obesity, diabetes, but also by absolutely critical social determinants of health and access to care.
Okay, moving right along to Section 3. Ventricular remodeling, the structural shift. Let's zoom right into the organ itself. You really have to wonder, when this vital engine is placed under immense pressure, or when it's just overloaded with excess fluid volume over months or years, how does it physically attempt to adapt? Because, it is a muscle after all.
It turns out the heart actually warps and changes its geometry in 2 main ways to handle that stress. First, we've got concentric hypertrophy. This happens under pressure overload, say from severe hypertension or a narrow aortic valve. The heart muscle literally bulks up, adding mass and thickening its walls to fight against that high pressure. On the flip side, we have eccentric hypertrophy. This kicks in during volume overload, like when a valve is leaking and way too much fluid is sloshing back into the chamber. To adapt to that, the heart actually dilates and enlarges the cavity size to handle the excess fluid. And honestly, both of these are incredible survival mechanisms, at first.
Which brings us to Section 4, the vicious cycle, when adaptation fails. This is where the tragedy of heart failure really begins. Let's trace how these well-intentioned adaptations actually become destructive. It's basically a downward spiral. It starts with that initial hemodynamic stress, the abnormal blood flow and pressure we just talked about. So the heart undergoes adaptive remodeling and hypertrophy. But over time, this excessive workload damages the tissue, leading to cell death and fibrosis. As those cells die off and thick scar tissue forms, the pump function gets worse, and because the pump is weaker, it triggers even more wall stress and throws out more compensatory distress signals, which, you guessed it, just feeds right back into the start of the cycle. It's a complete vicious cycle. Zooming in even closer to the cellular level, we can see exactly how the engine's microscopic parts are breaking down. We see myocyte hypertrophy, meaning the individual muscle cells are getting abnormally large. We see interstitial fibrosis, which is basically this thick, stiff scar tissue forming between the cells. We see apoptosis, which is literal programmed cell death. But guys, what is truly wild here is the re-expression of fetal genes. The stressed heart cells actually reach back into their genetic code and hit the biological factory reset button. They revert to fetal programming in this desperate attempt to survive, which unfortunately alters their contractile proteins and makes them function terribly in an adult body. Crazy, right?
Now, structure and muscle are really only half the battle. Let's hit Section 5, electrical dyssynchrony, the electrical misfire.
To fully understand engine failure, we have to look at the wiring. For up to a third of heart failure patients, the electrical signal that tells the ventricles to squeeze gets delayed, which you'd see on an EKG as a prolonged QRS interval. Think of it like the timing belt in your engine essentially snapping. The signal gets delayed, and the end result is this abnormal, uncoordinated ventricular contraction.
When an electrical delay like a left bundle branch block occurs, the left and right walls of the heart stop contracting at the exact same time. This non-synchronous contraction completely tanks the heart's mechanical efficiency. Because the squeeze is all out of whack, it impairs how the ventricle fills, heavily increases wall stress, and it can even distort the mitral valve, actively causing it to leak, a condition called secondary mitral regurgitation. The electrical misfire is physically ripping the engine's mechanics apart from the inside.
So, we've seen how the heart structure radically shifts, how its cells die and literally revert to fetal genetics, and how its electrical pathways just decline into chaos. We have completely deconstructed the failing engine. Which leaves us with this final, absolutely critical question to ponder. Now that we know exactly how and why this vicious cycle happens, how can modern medical therapies, structural interventions, and specialized electrical pacemakers step in to interrupt this cycle and fix the broken engine? That right there is the frontier of cardiovascular medicine. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning how the amazing systems around us and inside us truly work.